Hi everyone, my name is Vincent Lange, and in this video we will create this gorgeous Breyer wooden clock. This functioning wooden clock is inspired by Breyer's 50th anniversary release of the standing Palomino Saddlebred, that standing over clock. And obviously that release was inspired by the original Breyer, the Palomino standing Western horse over that clock. So this is why I chose this Palomino Saddlebred for this wooden clock. And I'm gonna show you step by step how to create this wooden clock now. So the main thing you need for this wooden clock is this wooden kit. And they have a variety of different clocks, but this is the one that we need. And if you look on this clock, it looks very different to this clock because I actually flipped this clock. So if we turn this upside down, you will see that this setup is the same as this clock. So we have to adjust it a little bit to fit the Breyer model on top. And we also only need kind of half of the wooden pieces to assemble it and make it look like this instead of what it's originally supposed to look like. But first things first, we're gonna unpack this and get all the wooden pieces. So it comes with a functional clock, but we're gonna put this aside for now and we're gonna look into this later on. So we have these wooden sheets with the cutout of the clock. So what we're gonna do now, we carefully press them out of the sheet. Some of the pieces are fairly fragile, so you need to be very careful, but the easiest is probably to push them from one way rather than the other. It's really hard to push them from the other way. It's just the one way where you can see most of the detail and you just like push them through. For some of the pieces that are a little bit smaller, it might be easier to use a tool or just the end of a brush to kind of poke them through rather than using your finger. Okay, so now that we got all these wooden pieces out of the wooden board, I'm going to show you which pieces we're going to keep, which pieces we're going to adjust, and which pieces you can just trash. So first of all, you'll have a bunch of these small little pieces, rectangles, linear ones, and even like circular ones. They can all go, except for these 4 small ones, because they're going to be on the clock face. So there's going to be, should be one additional bigger round one that can go, and then all these tiny pieces can also go. Next thing, I want to show you the pieces that you'll have to keep, and then I'll show you the pieces that we don't need. So first of all, we have this one that you should keep. Then these 2 side ones. This is going to be the bottom piece. These 2 side ones. This bigger round one. This long piece. This tool we will need later for the clock. Then as mentioned, we need these 4 small round pieces. And then lastly, we will need these 2 big pieces. These are the ones that we're going to paint next. These are keepers. Now I'm going to show you the pieces that we do not need. First of all, we have this big board that can go. Then we have 4 of these smaller pieces. They can all just go. This one can go, and we have these 2 longer versions of it as well. Then these 4 little ones, they can go. And then lastly, we won't need these 2 pieces either. That should be 14 pieces that you just trashed, and then you should keep 15 pieces. And then next step is we have to adjust these 2 pieces because as mentioned earlier, the clock has a different setup originally, but we want them upside down. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut them right here. We cut all of these 4 legs off. Obviously, if you want to, and if you want to be creative or different, you can cut them on different lengths. You can make it even round. But as you can see on this piece, I just like cut them flat above this angle. And I'm going to use a Dremel for this. If you don't have a Dremel at home, I'm sure you can also, because the wood isn't too strong and thick, you could probably use some sort of very strong scissors or any other sharp tool. Maybe an X-Acto knife will also work. Obviously be careful about your fingers, but I'm gonna go ahead and use the Dremel for this. To be exact, I'm gonna use this scary looking tool, which is round and nice to be able to cut those pieces quite quickly and efficiently. Okay, there we go. Now all of these 4 pieces are cut off, and these are what the final pieces should look like, which also means that you can trash these 4 pieces. What I also want to mention is that the clock came with this sanding paper that you can use for some of the edges, which is going to be very helpful. So the thing is, later on when we assemble the clock, it's actually gonna get a bit bigger because of the paint soaking into the wood. So it's gonna be harder to adjust the pieces and put them together. What helps us later on to get them together smoothly is actually to sand off the edges on these little gaps. So in a lot of the tools, you will see these little gaps where we will like put in other wooden pieces. It's just really helpful to like sand the little corners. So I'm just going to use this sandpaper just ever so slightly, sand the one corner, and then you sand the other corner, and it is just like giving these round edges, which will later on help for assembling the pieces into each other, because then it's not going to be as hard to get them into each other. So I would just go ahead and do that for all the different kind of angled pieces. And then obviously the pieces that we just like were dremeling off, you can also use some sanding paper to make it more smooth looking. Once you've sanded all of these pieces, we're ready for the fun part, which is painting. So just a heads up. First of all, this piece is just a tool. You do not need to paint this. Second of all, these 4 little dots do not need to be painted brown right now. So we're gonna leave them to the side because they're gonna be painted golden. So for the painting, you need obviously a brush. I'm gonna use this bigger brush, a cup of water, a plate for your paint, and then I'm gonna start with a brown paint. If you want to, and if you wanna have a darker tone than this, you can go ahead and mix this brown with a black. So I'm just gonna go ahead and mix that brown paint with some water. You wanna have a very nice, smooth paint mixture. I almost would say that you want 40% of the water and then 60% of the paint. Okay, so next we're gonna start painting these pieces, and what I did is I started from one direction and just went straight down. I'm not going in between. I keep just going down in one direction. The wood is very absorbing, so the paint will just like quickly suck into the wood. So we're just gonna paint them from one side, let it sit and dry, then we're gonna paint the other side, and then lastly we're gonna paint the edges. But paint one side for now, and then we're gonna let it sit for a minute to dry. Also be careful because some of the paint might collect in the gaps and edges, so just make sure there's no extra paint on the edges. And I want to mention, we want to paint all of these brown right now, except for the face of the clock, because that's going to be white. So I want you to like paint around it as much as you can without painting the clock face, because it's going to take a while to cover it again with white. The less brown we get actually on the clock face is helpful for us later to paint it white and don't have to use multiple layers on it. Again, watch out for the collecting paint on the edges. Okay, so once you've painted the pieces from both sides, we're gonna go ahead and paint the edges, and it's kind of the opposite issue right now. Like if you paint the edges, you will have leftover paint on the sides again, so just be aware of that, and you might just have to go into your other area again to just like blend that in a little bit so you don't have the leftover paint on each side like affecting the color, because they're gonna dry much darker. So just be mindful of painting the edges. Okay, so once all the pieces are painted brown, we're gonna go ahead with our white to paint the face of the clock. So we're gonna mix it with some water again, and then we just go in and try to be careful to not paint into the brown again. And as you can see, I painted a little bit of brown over there, so that just probably needs a few layers until that is actually covered with white. Okay, while we wait for this to dry so we can add another layer, we can go ahead and get the golden paint and add some of the details on these pieces. So I'm going to use a very thin, small brush to add the details to the wood pieces. So there's already carved in some of those details, so you can just go ahead and follow these lines. Just a heads up, this big piece is going to be on the bottom, so we don't actually need to add any details to that. But then you can also look at my clock that I did, where I added just some dots on some of the sides and added some gold pieces, like bigger areas. So you can just go ahead and have a little bit fun with it and just add gold wherever you want. And for these pieces, I just went ahead and added some like dots. Okay, as you can see, I've done the outline of these golden edges, And then I also added some gold on the bottom of these pieces. I went ahead and added the dots to these pieces. And then I also have now 3 layers of the white on there and then golden on the bottom. And the other only thing that I will paint golden are these golden dots that we're gonna use for the face of the clock. Okay, so the last thing we're actually gonna paint golden are these lines on the face of the clock. We just paint them golden like I did in this example piece. Okay, next we're gonna go ahead and get a fine pen, a black one, to outline the clock, the inner and the outer circle. So I'm just gonna go ahead and then just paint that all around. Okay, while we wait for these pieces to dry, we're gonna go ahead and create this little tiny golden braid for our Breyer model. So we have some golden thread and I'm gonna use 3 pieces. So I'm gonna cut 3 pieces in kind of this length. And then we go ahead and knot these together on the top like that. Now we go ahead and get some tape so we can tape this to the corner of our table. If you've got a private assistant with you, that also works. So I'm gonna go ahead and tape that to the corner of this table. And then I hope you all know how to braid. If not, I'm sure that you can look up some tutorials online. But I'm gonna use these 3 strings and then I'm just gonna go ahead and braid this little braid. Alright, and once you're at the end of this, we're gonna just do another knot and then you're done with the braid. And then we're gonna go ahead and cut the ends of these pieces so the knots are nice and clean. There we go. Okay, next thing, we're actually gonna go ahead and glue some of these pieces together. So you will need some super glue and we're definitely gonna use some gloves to protect our hands because you can easily glue your fingers together with super glue and we don't want that. So first things first, I will use our Breyer model and then we will have the ribbon that we just did and glue that behind its ear. So I'll go ahead and get the super glue and put a tiny bit on one end and then we're just gonna press that gently on the Breyer model. Okay, we're gonna let that sit for a second and then we actually go ahead on our clock face with our golden dots. We're just gonna go ahead and put some super glue on each of these dots and then just get our golden dots, place them on there and then firmly press on them for a few seconds, then let go, and then we're just gonna do that for all 4 of them. And we're also gonna let that sit for a second. Lastly, we're actually gonna have to glue our Breyer model onto this small platform so it's able to stand within the clock. So use this piece that you painted earlier and we're gonna use that like pointy bit for the front half and then the back half is just gonna go on the other end and we kind of like angle it. We're just gonna go ahead and put some super glue on the halves and then we just press firmly and then we're also gonna just let that sit for a second to dry. Okay, so now everything is dried, we can finally go ahead and assemble the clock. So first of all, we're gonna take these 2 side pieces and then this bottom piece and we're gonna use these edges to slide them into the top gap in here, so above the golden details. If it's too tight, we're gonna go ahead and use our sandpaper again and just sand it ever so slightly to make that go and smoother. And then we go ahead and do it on the other side as well, just above the golden details. There we go. Okay, next we're gonna use this floor piece and slide that into the other gap on the bottom of the gold pieces, and it really doesn't matter which side is up or down. Just make sure that you're sliding both ends kind of at the same time. All the way to the end like this. Next, we're gonna take this back piece and slide it into the back end. So there's a front with like 2 gaps, but we're just gonna use it in the back with the 1 gap and slide that in from the top. Next, we're actually gonna use this little wooden piece and slide it in between these 2 pieces. Let it fall into the bag, and then we're just gonna sit that upright to push up the middle piece. Because our model has to stand on this middle piece, and this middle piece needs some support that it doesn't get pushed down. So I just push this piece in the bag and almost use it as like a leg on this side, so it doesn't push down. Now we only got our front piece left, so we're gonna put that in the back gap. So we've got 2 in the front, and we're just gonna push that in the back, and then the golden pieces have to go into the gap on the bottom, so make sure that that aligns. There we go. Okay, now it's like pushed in, we can see the golden bit in the front, and it just aligns with everything. And then lastly, we just take these small little pieces and add them to the sides. Number 1. And number 2. And we're done with assembling the clock now. Okay, so now lastly, we're just gonna assemble the electronic clock to go into the back. You just want to make sure that the battery part is on the bottom. We're gonna use this rubber piece to put on top, and then we're gonna put this through the hole in the front. Then we're gonna use this small golden ring to put on top, and then we take this screw on top of that and just screw that ever so slightly with your hand until it's tight, and then you can use our wooden tool to screw that even tighter. Okay, we're gonna take the smallest one first and put it on there and press it firmly down. Then we take the bigger black one and put that on top and also press that firmly down. And then lastly, we take the red one and add that on top and press it firmly down. Then lastly, you just gotta take your battery and add that in the right direction in the bag. And now you probably won't be able to hear this, but it is running now. And then you can use this wheel in the bag to adjust it to the right time. To give your model a little extra touch, I added the 75th in gold on the back of the horse, and you can also easily do that as well. So I just printed out the Breyer Fest logo from this year, the 75, and then you just go ahead and cut that out of a piece of paper. And then I actually just used a pencil and I put it on the back of the model. And then I use this pencil to outline it, just to know where the 75 is, roughly. You can obviously also add the stars if you want to, or the Breyer logo. Okay, after you painted this on, you can use a pencil, you can use your golden paint, you can use your white paint to just outline it the way I did, or add any other sparkle, stars effect, whatever you kind of want. So this is our final clock. I hope you enjoyed watching this video and you could create something fun and unique to celebrate Breyer's 75th anniversary. And yeah, I hope you enjoy this clock. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!